Good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming. We're all well separated, aren't we? But it's lovely to see your faces this morning. Thank you for joining us. We've got a couple more that are coming, but we're going to get underway. My name is Leanne Kelly. I have the wonderful job of being the coordinator of galleries and museums for the Moreton Bay Regional Council. This one that you're in today is one of our 3 museums and 3 galleries. So if you haven't been to any others, I'm sure the ladies will give you a brochure. I want to start today, most importantly, by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land that we're meeting on today. I want to pay my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging, and acknowledge that their stories and their life are continuing in this region to this day. We're doing research at the moment for a project that will be realised in a couple of years, but it came up in that research that not far, literally just down on the river, which is very close to here, you could walk down, was one of the main encampments north of Brisbane. And I didn't realise that. And so when European settlement first started to move through this region, in just after Brisbane became not a penal colony, there were a number of camps down on the river, which is actually quite beautiful. I didn't know that that it was so close to where we are. So they're the kind of stories you're going to see here in coming times. I'm here to introduce our wonderful guests today. This Conversation Starter series, for those of you who've been here before, is our way of having conversations where the past informs the future. And as a heritage museum, we tell lots of historical stories. We have lots of fantastic photos. And we also tell lots of amazing stories that when we talk about them, they really resonate today. Earlier this year, we had an exhibition called Making Do, and it was focused, but continued on from the idea of 100 years ago, believe it or not, in the Great Depression, ironic where we find ourselves now. The whole idea of making do wasn't maybe a political thing or a personal choice, it was actually how you survived. So whether it was making do with what you owned or what you ate or what you wore, it was actually an ethos of life. And so we kind of explored that, we have some amazing things, and out of that came the predecessor to this conversation, which Jane actually hosted then as well. So today is a follow-on from that. The previous pre-isolation, pre-Another World, was a conversation starter about supporting local farmers, and it was quite a profound morning actually. I'm not ashamed to say I shed a couple of tears at some of the stories that were told that morning because they were actually very moving and profound. So it's wonderful to invite Jane and 2 new guests to be with us today. Jane has an Instagram account, like all the cool things do these days. Even I do, when I'm not that cool. So. And so if you follow Jane, she is a conversation starter. That's who she is. And I was really excited that she's joined us again today. I almost think of you as a friend of our museum now because we love having you here. Jane's here to start some more conversations today. We have 2 guests today. A little bit of Jane's background. She is a communications professional, and I think you kind of still are, aren't you? That will probably follow you your whole life. She grew up on a farm, she studied agricultural science, she worked for decades in rural journalism, again, starting conversations, and she was also in communications advocacy, running public awareness campaigns. So she's a past president and life member of the Rural Press Club, and Queensland's 2010 runner-up. Good grief, who won it? That's what I want to know. The runner-up of the Rural Women's Award. After completing her postgraduate leadership study, Jane set up Textile Beat, which is how I've come to know Jane, in 2013, to share an appreciation for natural fibres and slow clothing philosophy. She's wearing her workmanship today. So that's how now, in the beauty of 2020, the gift that keeps on giving, Jane's here with us, but she was meant to be other places, a long way from here, and she'll share a bit of that story today. Her 2 guests, we're going to actually ask them to tell their own story. We've got Peter Kearney, who's joined us today. Peter's connected to Millen Farm in Samford Valley. He's the founder of that farm. And he's going to tell us a little bit about his life in the Samford Valley for the last 23 years, and Jane's got lots of great questions. Jackie's going to tell us about a really fancy salad. That's what I want to know about. That's what I've, honed in on. But apart from the really fancy salad, she has a fantastic story about Blue Dog Farm. So please join me in welcoming them and for this conversation today, and thank you for coming again today and being beautifully socially distanced. I really appreciate it. We're going to let some people sit down just before we start. Come on in. And again, so thank you. I'm going to hand over to Jane.
Thank you so much, Leanne. It's wonderful to be back at Pine Rivers Heritage Museum for our conversation starter, Conscious Consumerism, Closer, Fresher, Better. And just Leanne was mentioning the Making Do exhibition. I was really proud to have what I call my history skirt as a feature in that museum. And it was because of that I used it on the front cover of my book, Slow Clothing. So anyway, I was back here in February before our world turned upside down with the global pandemic. And that challenged the way we live and exposed vulnerabilities in how we source food, clothing, personal protective equipment, and many other things, as you'd be well aware. A recent report from Deloitte's, A Shock to the Food System was its title, suggests flaws caused by long, rigid supply chains that disconnect producers and consumers and result in a lot of food loss, up to 30%, and value distortion. Public health experts suggest COVID-19 is just one of a line of pandemics in our globalised world caused by ecological pressures and population growth and other things. So, this is our future. The link between food and health does seem obvious, but what we eat or don't eat is actually a leading contributor to non-communicable diseases that affect our quality of life and drain healthcare systems. 2/3 of Australian adults are overweight, and I'm ashamed to say I'm actually in that category, and at higher risk of chronic diseases such as type 2 diabetes, heart disease, and some cancers. And that also makes us more vulnerable to coronavirus. So food security became an issue early in the early stages of the pandemic. As you'd know, people stockpiled, supermarket shelves were emptied, and that caused the National Farmers Federation to actually issue an assurance to Australians that we do produce enough food for 75 million people, more than 3 times our population. But localism is arising. We know that there's some food out there, but we're actually today talking about closer, fresher food sources that are literally in our own backyard, and how we can support and grow nutritious, local, nutrient-dense food for preventive health. So my name is Jane Milburn. I'm a Churchill Fellow, actually, but I'm untravelled. So I'm currently doing a permaculture design course at Northeast Street Farm, and I know Jackie has also done a PDC as well, learning about ethics and design principles that enable resilience, regeneration, and abundance. We've got these fabulous local food producers and educators here today. Jackie Hinchy from Blue Dog Farm and Reco Ring Debra, and also Peter Kearney from My Food Garden in the Samford Valley. So they're going to be talking across a range of topics: sourcing and using local produce, advice for achieving self-sufficiency in backyards and small gardens, as well as the exciting potential of urban agriculture. So instead of actually introducing them, I'm going to get them to give you a 2-minute elevator pitch, not that we're going to necessarily time it, just so they can say in their own words who they are and what they do. So we'll start with you, Jackie.
Hi, I'm Jackie from Blue Dog Farm, and I have a small market garden. So it's 10 by 20 metres. So it's about probably 3 times this, maybe not 3 times the size of this room. And I very intensively grow about 15 different crops, some of them which you might know, rocket and lettuce and baby kale. And then there are many that you wouldn't know. But I throw them all into a salad mix together. And it includes petals and herbs, so that it's something that is interesting and a bit fancy and very diverse. So the leaves are from many different families. So they've got very different nutrient capabilities. And so they're better for your tummy than having a bit of spinach and, what else? Spinach and lettuce, I think they call a salad mix done at the supermarket. So I grow them, look, my word for it is that I grow them thoughtfully. There is no way that I would use a chemical fertiliser fungicide, pesticide or herbicide anywhere on my property. And my plants are all just nourished through, mostly, a lot of it is processes and just applying nutrients or instigators of nutrients at the right time throughout the growing cycle. My salad is available only locally, so I don't want that supply chain to get long and complicated. I'm only growing it for my own community here in Moreton Bay and around the northern suburbs of Brisbane. So I can make a living, and I have to say that I'm not responsible for providing all of our family's income, but I can make a living for myself from my little garden, and also a little bit more from the grass-fed beef that we grow, and same thing, sell direct to our customers. That's Blue Dog Farm. Oh, I should explain that Blue Dog Farm is called Blue Dog Farm because we've got a very loud and bossy blue dog who thinks that it actually says Blue Dog's Farm and that she is the boss and that I am her employee.
And it's a fabulous place to visit too. I came out there recently. We'll get back to more of that soon. But Peter, perhaps can we hear your 2-minute spiel, please?
Did you say 2 minutes?
I'm not timing you.
Well, you mentioned backyard before, so my journey into the urban food growing started in my backyard in Melbourne when I was 10 years old, and that's a very long time ago. And in having moved to Queensland about 30 years ago and out into Samford Valley 24 years ago to send our children to the Sanford Steiner School, we've been on acreage ever since, and I significantly increased my food growing and started to sell food and began to study organic and biodynamic growing methods. And really we as a family decided that we would only eat organic food, and we had 4 children. We have 4 children. And I needed to grow a lot more food to stick to that ethic, really, that we chose for our family. So, and I'd realised quite some time before that, having been involved in quite intellectual work in software design and accounting and stuff, that as soon as I got my hands in the dirt, I started to get healed. It was like this beautiful rejuvenation process. So I had this higher purpose, in a sense, for growing. But when we made that decision to eat organic food, it really started to grow more. It opened my eyes a lot more to the dysfunction of our food system and the weaknesses that were evolving in it, and that there's so many wicked problems in it that you could look at it and say, well, what can I do? You know, it's just looks all too hard. But I think it really does start in your backyard. And so for me, I started our business, My Food Garden, 14 years ago, and now we run lots of organic and biodynamic food growing workshops. We have a lot of clients who we coach and design. I just come from a food garden job this morning. My son, who I was working with, said to me, "Dad, why don't you go in your grungy gardening gear?" But I did change. Yeah, and we also do consulting on larger urban agriculture projects. So I'm very, very, very interested in the transformational potential of getting small-scale intensive food growing into smaller spaces. I have a patch the same size as yours, and I'm always experimenting with intensification of production, and I teach that in our workshops too. So yeah, is that enough?
Yeah, that's great. Yes, that was exactly what I was going to do. Just to check in with our audience, who's already gardening? Who's already growing a lot of their own food? So maybe half of you? Yeah.
One parsley plant is a garden, it's okay.
That's all you need to start, isn't it, Jackie? So nutrition density of your salad. I mean, your salad is very beautiful, I know from having tasted it, and in fact, you motivated me to diversify the range of little plants that I've got growing in my little green space there, and I'm self-sufficient now, which is fabulous. But the nutrient density of these things that are leaves that are grown in a non-broad-scale situation, can you give us some info on that?
Scientifically, I can't. And it's a shame. I think Peter and I we know that our plants and our food are better for you than what you can get from the supermarket. But a leaf test is about $130 per leaf. And I've got 15 crops. I would love to get them all done and then take an average of the nutrient density of my crops, just so that I can prove that my salad is better. But I tell you what, a better measure is when mums say that their kids are eating the salad. Now, it's not a sweet salad, it's quite bitter. You know, it has a lot of rocket and mustards and sorrels. Probably the children are enticed by it looking really interesting, diverse colours and petals and really unusual shaped leaves in a bowl on a table. And often I say to mums, just put it out on the table and you eat a leaf at the time. It mightn't be the best table manners, but just eat and consider what you're eating. And the children copy. They especially eat the leaves that are the salad that's got the flowers in it. I believe, evolutionarily, that we would go walking along a track, possibly as these people did down to the river, and they would take leaves off plants and try them. Some of those leaves may be poisonous and they'd get a tummy ache and they wouldn't go back to it. But otherwise, subconsciously, their bodies would be working out if this is really good for me. Is it medicine or is it really, really dense food? The next time that they come past that bush, they would have it again. I 100% believe this to be true because when I'm harvesting rocket, now I don't know if you know, but rocket is associated with liver health. I don't have a liver problem, but I'm really drawn to rocket. I love the bitter, and when I'm harvesting, that's what I go for again and again. I'd love to know why. So if you just step back and don't try to listen to your body, just do what you need, I think that you end up being drawn to what you need. That is all that I can say about nutrient density because I can't prove anything. I'm sure Peter's going to have an opinion on that.
Yes, Peter, what's your opinion?
Yes, I think with the plants, if they're looked after in the right way, then their nutrient density will be high. And what I have observed in our food growing spaces is I don't have issues with insects and I don't have issues with animals eating my crops, and I have no covering whatsoever on anything. And so what I know about the science in relation to that is that the sugar level that is in the leaves via the photosynthesis process can be measured. But when it gets to a certain point, the plants become unpalatable to the insects and the animals, but they're perfect for human consumption. So there is, and without measuring, scientifically, you can know that your plants are at the right level. I mean, the insects and animals won't be attacking them, but you can know by their form, like if their shape and their form is really, really strong, their aroma and their flavour. So they're the three things which you can really determine with your senses, from sight, the form of it, the aroma with your nose, and the taste with your mouth. So I think it's really important to try to work with your senses as much as possible because, the science of soil and plants is very complex, and I think it's a lot better and it's worthwhile, but for most people you can garden really well by relying on your senses.
relying on your gut feel.
Yes.
You know, just trust your gut and take
It's
in what's good for you.
intuition, isn't it? Intuition plays such an important part. And I'm fascinated, really, Peter, that you're organic kind of just because you can be, whereas, you know, corporate large scale would be using chemicals and obviously upsetting the natural balance that's in the soil and in your little, in your garden. So it really... Are you totally supportive of organics, or some people say that the nutrition is not much different between not exactly supermarket leaves, but, you know, like the tests have been done to show that there's not a great deal of difference between organic and non-organic?
Okay, well, I don't believe those tests for a start. But I use organic practices as a platform, and then I potentise all of those with biodynamic methods, which use these prepared herbs and manures, and I also work in time with planetary movements, and I also recognise that the consciousness of the gardener within the patch affects the quality of the plant. So I work with those three things of, you know, potentising the organic processes, timing with planetary movements, and really, really concentrating when I go into the garden to have this feeling of love for the patch, trying to clear my mind of everything else. And every day I sit at my garden. It's got a special contemplation chair that I use, and have a bit of a meditation and think about all the life that is in the garden and the birds that are around the garden, and how, you know, we can all sort of work as a team. Yeah.
It's a very old school, in a way, appropriate to be talking about this at the Heritage Museum, really, that everything old is new again, as we find that we need to be producing more food locally. And can you talk a bit more about the mill and farm and the idea of more urban agriculture systems?
Okay, so Mill and Farm started out of a really interesting community process called Sanford Futures, and it was really driven by the Sanford Parklands area, which is a large piece of land that was a CSIRO research station, and then it was subdivided and there was a portion that was for public use. And some master planning had been done by the council, but then this was about 10 years ago, I think, and Woolworths wanted to take over Sanford, and the Sanford community rose up and stopped Woolworths doing that, which was fantastic. But our local councillor, Bob Miller, said to us, so you've all got to get... There was a group of about 300 of us. He said, you've all got together to say what you don't want in Sanford, so how about you use that energy to say what you do want for Sanford, and in particular the Parklands area. So that then triggered this 3-year process of surveying the Sanford community and finding what they wanted. So one of the areas was food, and they wanted local food, and yet there was all this land, but there didn't seem to be a nexus between there's land and we want food, but none of it is nowhere near enough is being grown. So there was resources there, but not a way to achieve it. So that was the point of Mill and Farm. So I led that group, and we got the land, negotiated with the council, and formed the organisation and raised money and got a big following. And then eventually the farmer came along, and the point of that, the key philosophy of that organisation was to create a duplicatable method of commercially sustainable urban farming. So it's still striving towards that, and it's really an interesting thing because around the world, that very question is being pushed in virtually every country about how do we create an environment or opportunities for people to make a living growing food around cities. And I think what I've learnt from that process, and also where our business has been doing work on some property developments as well, and planning work with Moreton Bay Regional Council on more urban agriculture in the area, is that compared to sort of the conventional farm where it makes all of its money out of selling food, the urban farming model needs to incorporate a very strong focus on the cultural aspects. So you have education, you have visits, you have volunteers coming. So there's this whole engagement of local people in your process. So it's sort of, to me, it brings back the culture that, the word is agriculture and yet it's become agribusiness. So there's a real beauty in that, and I've seen it so many times with people coming to our gardens and workshops and going to all sorts of urban agriculture venues around the world, because I travel quite a bit in this space. So it's it's really wonderful to see how people join together over food.
That's fabulous, isn't it? And it shows you how far we've drifted away, or that difference between agribusiness and agriculture, which is around community and feeding ourselves and healing ourselves through growing food is exciting. So what proportion of land do you feel in Moreton Bay Shire has got potential, or Moreton Bay Council, I should say, has potential? Like, how much could we contribute to the needs of the community by growing it locally?
Well, in the planning work that we've done with the council, there's been 70 hectares of land identified, but then that excludes all private land, and in other parts of Australia and indeed in other parts of the world, there are ways for local governments are figuring out ways to help landowners to make land available for urban farming. So there's thousands of hectares of land in the region that could be used. But the public land, there's a lot of public land available, and how much is grown just depends on the intensity. But, I've got a patch of 200 square metres and I can produce 10 kilograms of produce per square metre of organic produce.
How much time does that take you, though? Because that's often the limiting factor, isn't it? The people.
Probably a day a week at the most.
About an episode of MasterChef every day.
Yes.
Yes, it's just where we direct our time and our energy that makes the difference, isn't it, Jackie? Just before we move back to you, Jackie, and hear more about your story, I'd just like to keep going with you, Peter, about the concept that I know Richard Dennis in his book Affluenza says that lawn is the biggest irrigated crop in America. So I imagine in Moreton Bay Regional Council area there'd be a lot of irrigated lawn that maybe needs to be, redesigned and cultivated to grow food instead of something that's a burden.
Totally, I totally agree. And I remember when I did a presentation to the Sanford community at the community hall there was about 500 people there, and this was the pitch to the community for the whole farming thing, and I said to them, Sanford used to be an agricultural area, and now all that land is used to feed ride-on mowers and horses, and a lot of the food we eat is imported. How does that make sense? Like, we have this incredible asset and this beautiful climate here that allows us to grow food every day of the year.
And I think that needs to come from the ground up, though, doesn't it, in terms of building community and change? Jackie, what views have you got there?
That is spot on. It comes from us. We are so anti-big ag and so anti the supermarkets. They're just responding to our demand. So, does anyone have a bit of a veggie garden and they're growing a bit of food? Yeah? Do you ever give a bit of what you grow to your neighbours over the fence? Do you give it to your children or, yeah? Could you imagine them growing something and giving it the excess of what they grow back to you? And then possibly you've got a fence between you and your neighbour that you could put a passion fruit on. There you go. Ta-da! You're starting to feed Moreton Bay. It doesn't have to come from government policy. It can come from you. If it comes from you, it's a lot more... it's demand-driven, isn't it? It's you leaning over the fence and saying, can I swap some pumpkins for cabbage? And then just stop buying it from the supermarket.
So it's the outsourcing, isn't it? We outsource a lot of things because, and looking back at previous generations, I mean, I come from a farming community and everybody grew food, you didn't really buy a whole lot in. And do you feel we can never get back to that though, or are we into an outsourcing culture?
Yeah. Look, remember when COVID happened and the supermarket supply chain failed and everyone thought maybe there's going to be a food revolution? Did anyone hear that? Or, maybe everything's going to change. It didn't last for long enough and we weren't poor enough to really suffer. What was that making do? We didn't have to make do with eating wholly lettuce and the second-rate food that we might have had in our veggie, not my garden, your gardens. We didn't have to make do with eating what we had in our own gardens. We could get back to the supermarkets within 3 weeks. If things had been a bit tougher, maybe a few more 20-something-year-olds would have gone, I'm going to dig up mum and dad's backyard and because they'd lost their jobs, start a business selling potatoes. I actually had a whole lot more volunteers turning up at my house through April, May. And they've got some beds around the periphery, which used to be wild. And now they're still turning up. I feel like I'm managing their gardens a lot. But they're growing crops that I'm not growing in the edges of my market garden. So I think that it comes from the community, whether it be demand for the fruit and veggies, or if it is from the aspect of a young person or anyone wanting to be a young grower.
Mm. And so the pandemic influence, do you think it's evaporated, or are we still, do you feel that we're on a journey somewhere?
Yeah, I think we're on a journey anyway. And I know that when you're in a sphere such as Peter and I are, and you, Jane, where you are surrounded by good stuff, making do and just eating good food that you've grown yourself or that has been grown in your local community. Being normal, being like our granny was. Sorry, what was the question?
Just the pandemic influence.
Oh, that's right.
Do you feel,
Look, there was a bit of a bump from it, but I think in general a lot of people have just gone back to their old ways very quickly. It would be really nice if we could just see people knuckling down for a bit longer.
And where do you think the entry point is? Personally, during the pandemic, I was doing a lot of walking in the neighbourhood and gathered seeds. And I was really grateful for people who had verge gardens because, you could find some parsley seed and I've grown it and now it's ongoing. So I think, perhaps that the starting point is growing your greens, your herbs, perhaps. Is that something that everybody can do?
One parsley plant. parsley and chives, and just enjoy it and put it somewhere where you can reach it. That might be a permaculture principle there of having things in a zone 1 garden.
Close.
So just
Zone
have
1.
them at the back steps, or have it on your windowsill so you can use it. And only build a garden that's as big as what you can manage. If it's only this big, go for it. And don't spend a fortune on buying some fancy manufactured imported garden.
A lack of confidence. Do you think that's part of it?
Confidence and time. And we're so distracted by doing techie things, you know that? Like YouTubing how to grow a garden instead of growing a garden.
Because they kind of almost grow themselves, some things, don't they? But water's a really limiting factor.
No.
Not in our climate, you don't think?
I would like to go back to what Peter said about how he's got a meditating chair in his garden. I've got a stump. Same thing though, if you just spend time out there, I don't know how it is, but stuff grows. And it's growing because of your intent. It's growing because you're spending time there and you're noticing what's going on. And you might happen to throw a packet of seeds out. You may happen to harvest something, process it, like harvest your basil, turn it into pesto, and voila, sometimes it comes back again and you get twice as much. Just spending time thinking about what you're doing, observing what's going on with insects and all the little things that grow in the soil, and enjoying your garden, just enjoying being there really helps.
Peter, your insights. I know organic matter holds a lot of water, so in some ways that's a key for getting going in your garden. So maybe I should ask you how do you think people can get going in growing more of their own food?
I think that they can start on a small scale, but say if you've got a yard, then I would usually not start in a structure. I would try to, use the grass and dig it up and not buy in soil, but to learn from someone or learn how to transform it, because otherwise everything is guesswork. And the key to growing food well is to be able to manage the soil. That's the most important priority. So if all you ever do is buy in soil, you'll never actually learn how to manage soil. So I think it's better to start by improving it. Like the garden job that I just came from this morning in Albany Creek, and we built a garden for clients on this space, and which was in their front yard, and all the neighbours are all stopping, looking at it, saying, what's going on? And there was this area that had all, fairly messy native and non-native plants, but it actually had good soil. So we cleared it and then put some timber edging down, used the native soil, and we've planted a crop to feed the soil. And I think this is a really key thing, is that even if you buy nursery soil, it's better to assume that it's not what they say it is, and to start growing a crop into it that feeds the soil, not yourself, but to be patient, and just hold
And what
back.
would that be? Is that...
So, say at this time of the year, it would be good. I mean, it depends on the season, but I would usually always start with a legume crop, which is...
Name them specifically.
Oh,
Pigeon
so
pea
say
or something
mung
like
beans.
that?
So we were planting mung bean this morning, but you could plant cowpea. There's lots of legumes. You can buy... The process is called green manure, and that's where you grow a crop in the soil and you let it grow to a point, and then you cut it down, and then it just breaks down into the soil. I mean, to give you an example, in our patch, which is 200 square metres, and I always put most of the area into green manure between January and March, because it's a bit hot to grow a lot of things then. But I leave one bed for veg and I put that under shade cloth. But I had all cowpea in there, which is a legume. They all grew to about this size. They take 2 months to get to that height. and then they're cut down, laid on the bed so they become mulch, and within 1 month they're completely gone into the soil. I don't dig them out at all, I just let the natural process draw them down into the soil. So it's really, really easy to do it. It costs virtually nothing to do it, and it puts all of these beautiful, minerals and living nitrogen into the soil, and the plants love it. So I would always start by trying to understand how you can improve the soil in a simple way.
And you run courses on this,
Yeah, I do.
Peter? Yeah, so can you tell us a bit more about them and their availability?
Okay, so I run a 4-part organic gardening course, which the council sponsor one series, that's full for this year. And I also run another one that isn't council sponsored, and that's also full. There's 20 people in each. And that usually runs twice a year. So I've got 2 sets of both of those, and I'll be announcing the dates for both of those later in the year. And then I also run a 2-day biodynamic food growing workshop 3 times a year, and I have one of those in November on the 14th and the 15th. So we've still got a few spaces remaining. So you can, if you're interested in that, you can have a look on our website at myfoodgarden.com.au on the workshops tab. So
Great,
yeah.
thank you.
That's
And
all
can I ask you to choose your favourite crop to grow, or one that's perhaps the easiest to grow?
Oh, look, I mean,
Most productive?
my favourite, I think, is in this climate are peas. And it's interesting because peas can be a cool season crop, but really they're very easy to grow. They're radically productive if you put them on a climbing frame, and the growing season is quite long. Like compared to, other crops of the similar family like beans. Beans are much more fussy with the season than peas are, so I start planting peas in April, and I planted a batch in my last batch about 6 weeks ago, and they're fruiting like crazy now. And I know they're going to finish in about, a month and a half, and that's why they're flowering so much, which is good. So, peas. I love, every time I go down the garden, I eat peas, every time.
Yeah, mine are going well too. What about you, Jackie? What's your favourite thing to grow?
My favourite thing to grow isn't in the fancy salad mix. I love ginger. I love the plants, their little flowers. I love that they're perennials, so that they grow just in a corner of the garden where they can stay forever. I pull them up. I run down to the garden and pull out a piece of ginger whenever I need it. I never store it in the fridge, or I never store it in the house. I just run and get it fresh. And I just love the scent of fresh ginger. And it's so fat and plump compared to the ginger that you can buy at the shops.
Yeah, it's exciting, isn't it? And ginger is actually grown locally, like it's a local food, isn't it?
Yep.
So what would success look like for you, Jackie? Where do you think we can go with this?
Success would be all the front yards in Moreton Bay ripped up and turned into food gardens. It would be fantastic. It happens, in Canada, there are a lot of front yards being ripped up and turned, the fence is taken down and people are growing food. I have a fellow who used to volunteer on a farm that Peter's associated with called Loop Growers, closely associated with. One of their volunteers works for me. So for 2 days a week, he comes, and on my 50th birthday, I gave myself the gift of getting a young guy to come and do all the digging for me. That's Brady's job. Brady is now looking for some land in Brisbane to rip up and turn into a food garden himself. So I'm a little incubator of farmers, I think. It would be wonderful if if teenagers got together and, took out the fences between their houses and started farming in their suburbs. And it's easy to do. Council are pretty easy on you. I'm not so sure about getting out on your verge, on your front road, but you can have a little, an esky under a tree, have an honesty box, or you just say inquire at the front door and have your neighbours exchanging food. I love it.
And we haven't talked about the Reco ring. Can you tell us a bit more about that, Jackie?
Well, this isn't so much about growing food, which we've been speaking about, but if I can explain how this phenomenon that has hit that we have put into Debra and Samford and now Red Hill. When COVID happened, my sales dried up by 50%, and I had to find another way to get the salad to the people. So I had seen a video in February of a system, of an online farmers market in Scandinavia, where farmers have set up, local farmers, so let's say in this instance it would be Millen Farm, Loop Growers, Blue Dog Farm, maybe some honey growers or beekeepers, what else? A few people who make, who are bakers of good goods, get together with a Facebook group, and customers comment on their posts. So I say, I've got Blue Dog Farm salad for sale, $12.50 a bag. Pickup is on Saturday between 11 and 12. Customers then comment to order. They might say, 1 please, and then they transfer money into my bank account. And then on Saturday morning, between 11 and 12, I will be in a car park in Debra, lined up with all the other vendors. We don't have any signage, we don't have a stall, we don't have the zippy credit card payment thing. Our customers just drive past us and we put their items through their back window into their esky, and they keep driving and take it all home. It's really, really simple, and it's a fabulous way for farmers to distribute their product because we're only there for an hour. It's not like going to a farmer's market where you have to go if it's raining and no one turns up and you're there all day and you miss out on the kids' sport. And it's wonderful for customers because they're just able to order from the couch while they're watching Netflix on Facebook, and then they drive through and pick it up. So that has saved us. We've got one in Debra and one in Samford, and we're just starting one in Red Hill in the city now. And we'll see how that one goes as well. But that's been really nice for commercial growers, local commercial growers, and also backyard growers who might have too many limes or...
So that's kind of revolutionising the farmers market concept, do you feel?
It's much more accessible than a farmers market. We actually hope to open one in North Lakes before Christmas.
So you're expanding on a roll.
Mm-hmm. Look, it's also, it doesn't have anything to do with me. I'm just one of the vendors. It's just that I've had a little bit of practice now at helping set them up. So it's just loosely associated groups of growers. Anyone who wants to be a vendor, having a Facebook group and then selling their produce through that. So the one in North Lakes will be started by a fellow who is a paleo baker, and he's going to find some eggs, pork, chicken producers.
So it's a distribution system, isn't it?
It is.
It
is a rebel supply chain.
Yeah, a rebel supply chain.
Getting rid of the middlemen.
Ah, very good. So, Peter, what does success look like to you?
Similar to what we've just been talking about is getting more and more people who are working on their own little patch or whatever size it is, and having spaces where it's, I guess, more possible for people if they wanted to go commercial at whatever level. There are technology platforms existing now that will help with that, and there's more evolving, no doubt. So and I think with the COVID thing, what I've noticed is a really big increase in people wanting to grow their own food. a really huge increase in inquiry for me, which is good. But I must admit, I would prefer people to be motivated not out of fear, but out of what is the ideal of what they're seeking with their own health and to heal the earth, which we all need to do. So, but I know that it can't all happen at once, and I've always felt that growing food is the most profoundly democratic thing that you can do. So, yeah, every little step taken is worthwhile. So however long it takes is however long it takes.
So what's your one piece of advice for living well in a post-COVID world?
Oh, grow your own food, of course.
Yeah, it's hard to grow it all though, isn't it?
Oh, look, you can never really be self-sufficient in our society, but that's okay. Is grow as much as you can and use your garden as a place of healing for yourself, because it's really easy to become toxic in this world.
So do you talk to your plants?
Sure, yeah.
Good on you. We won't ask you what you tell them. Now, Jackie, what's your one piece of advice for living well in a post-COVID world?
I don't have any advice. I hope you all enjoy your gardens today. It doesn't matter if your garden is just a 2-litre milk bottle with a bit of chives in it. Just enjoy it and share them with someone else and swap them. Our whole conversation has actually been about growing veggie gardens, but there is a lot more to eat than vegetables. One thing that is really difficult is knowing where you can find things other than vegetables. Where can you get ethical, local meat and eggs and honey? What else do we eat? Grains. Yeah, grains are a big one. Where do you get them? I think that is something that is really, really lacking in the whole scene. All you can do, I think, is go searching. Go to your local farmers markets. Come to Reco. But go to your local farmers markets and meet the farmer that is behind the stall and ask him, if what else he grows, how can he deliver to your home? Can you visit his farm? And this is a tough one, but don't be deterred by what you might perceive as a big price to pay for the kilograms that you might get. Because I believe that we are all eating too much. And we are eating too much because the food that we are eating is not nutritious. I'll give you a quick example. Pasta. That stuff that comes in the packets that's in the middle rows of the supermarket is not very nutritious. You've got to have a huge plate of it because you feel like you're still hungry when you're eating it. I bought some pasta that was made by an Italian cafe in Queen Street Mall, and they're selling it through Brisbane Bulk Buys and Discounts, $16 a kilogram. But it's fresh, it's wet pasta that is just beautifully made. You only have the tiniest portion, honestly, about as much as what's in there of water. You don't want any more because it's a heavy pasta with your sauce on it. $16 a kilo, I would say that you would be getting a meal for maybe $2. So it's worth it. And it's the same with meat. I grow grass-fed beef and I make sure that it's packaged in small portions because you don't need to have a great big rump, which will cost you $30 a kilogram. You don't need it. And that way you are able to support your local farmers. They have an income, you're eating less, you'll be getting just as much nutrition as you were eating a huge amount of factory farmed food.
So
And what about crickets? We haven't mentioned crickets. Someone needs to go into cricket farming.
So what other opportunities are there? Cricket farming, yes. Any others? Jackie, you're a font of wisdom in this.
I don't know, Moreton Bay Council isn't represented here, are they? Oh, what about quail farming? You know, you don't have to pluck quails, you just take the whole skin off and then throw them in the fry pan. It's easy, and you can eat their eggs. Fish. Well, you know, you can't, I don't know, I can't just eat vegetables. I need eggs. You can all have eggs. Who's got chooks? Good on you. Do you have to buy eggs as well, or do you have enough? That's awesome. Duck eggs are a thing. Would anyone here like to eat duck eggs? Great. Do you know this lady? She has duck eggs.
So you're building community, aren't you, Jackie, as you go? That's very exciting. Well, we do have local food to share. So any concluding remarks you'd like to make, Peter, before we close and spend half an hour building community?
No, other than thanks for the opportunity to do this.
Oh, thank you for bringing your, your insights, and I think that healing aspect is going to be very significant into the future as well, the healing through the food that we eat. Just one thing for you to finish on, Jackie, is talking about how you're regenerating your land and measuring that. Can you finish on that?
Aha. You know how we have financial accounts and we know what everything costs? One thing to think about is the environmental cost of everything we do. So we are using something called environmental accounting on our farm. We are measuring our water quality, carbon, soil health, our commercial health, our social health, and then there is a formula that can be used to give us a number of, they're not carbon credits, but they're accounting for nature credits. And that value is going to be measured, it was measured in May, and it's going to be measured next May. And the increase in that number or the difference, is going to be traded on an accounting for nature exchange in Chicago, because European corporations have to invest into environmental improvements. Doesn't have to happen in Australia, but I will say that the Queensland government has given us a rebate to be able to do this, so they are very supportive. That means that we will be monetising the improvements that we make on our land. So I'm making sure that our waterway is clean and as healthy as possible by having natural ecosystems all around it. We only use non-synthetic fertiliser in the garden, so we'd never want anything to wash down into the waterways, etc., etc., etc. And all of that is going to be measured and monetised, which is very cool. And we're hoping that in the future, community groups will be able to do the same thing. So possibly you would have a local area, not as big as Moreton Bay, but just say, the Petrie Accounting for Nature group. Individuals would band together, and you would you would account for the improvements in your gardens and to be able to sell that collectively on the Accounting for Nature exchange in Chicago. Isn't that cool?
That's amazing. I mean, I think what sits behind that is striving to balance the ecology, economy, and community, because that's what we really need to do in urban agriculture. And there is one more thing I want to say, is there are some really large urban agriculture initiatives evolving through Moreton Bay Regional Council, which will be made public reasonably soon. So we have some connection to that, but it's still, I can't really say much at this point in time. But they're very supportive. The council, the Moreton Bay Regional Council, is very supportive of urban agriculture initiatives. So that's great. So I think we're in the right place to be able to do that. Yep.
That's exciting. And, you know, clearly we've got a lot of work to do to change the system when you look at what's happening, like, you know, fires, floods, all of that disaster. You know, we need to change the way that we're living, and perhaps starting with local urban agriculture is a big step forward.
Sure. Yep.
And just to finish off, I'd like to say, well, look, we've talked all about food, which is actually 20% of our carbon footprint is what we eat. But the other thing, our skin is our largest organ, and our clothing and fibre, like local fibre to me is the next big horizon. I'll make that point. I'm wearing wool, cotton, and this is silk, none of which, even though I've dyed it all with local plants, it can't be really. The wool, definitely from merino country, can be sourced locally. And I know there's one line of cotton called Full Circle Fibres, which is fully Australian cotton, but basically we've got globalised fibre and clothing, and so that's the next frontier that we can talk about another day. So
We need a sheep and some silkworms.
yes, so thank you very much, Jackie and Peter. And thank you to Moreton Bay Regional Council, particularly the Pine Rivers Heritage Museum, for making this possible. And I think we have Rachel now to conclude and wrap up. Thank you.
Thank you everyone for joining us today for our conversation starter on conscious consumerism, and a big thanks to our hosts Jackie Milbourne and our guest speakers Peter Kearney and Jackie Hinchy. We are very grateful to have you here today sharing your knowledge with us and really inspiring change in the way that we source our food, sustainability, urban farming. It was really interesting, and I know I'll definitely go home and look at my little garden and see how I can change it. As the museum continues to navigate its way through this difficult time, we're really hoping to continue to provide small events like this for the community. So if you enjoyed today, please share with your friends. Keep an eye on our social media and website. We've also got a new Instagram account just for galleries and museums. And coming up to Christmas, we'll have a lot of events. So yeah, definitely keep an eye on those. On that note, we'll have Melissa serving some refreshments. Our food today has been locally sourced from Grays at Sanford. Jane and our guests will be here for a while, so please join us to continue the conversation. Thank you.